that part of me thinks this is going to be 3 hours long. We'll find out. Hello, everybody. For today, we are going to be discussing Apothecary Diaries light novels 5 through 8. And if you're unfamiliar, these parts carry us outside of what we've seen in any other form of Apothecary Diaries. So this is beyond what the first 2 seasons of the show have within them. And we are going to be talking spoilers throughout the entirety of this. So just giving that heads up right off from the start. We did do a discussion for volumes 1 through 4 if you're interested in that, but jumping straight into these, how do you feel like these 4 novels compare to the first 4 for you?
Sean, starting with me.
Yes.
First of all, hello everyone. Thanks for joining me. How did I think these 4 light novels compare to the first 4? I find this question difficult to answer. I think I liked the ending of the first 4 because it was exciting and riveting. But I also liked these 4 because you kind of know the characters at this point. I think the first couple, especially because we already watched the anime, you're kind of like, okay, I kind of know, the routine. So I was, it's nice just not knowing anything that's going to happen. I liked that experience. So because of that, I might actually have liked these 4 more. I kind of just liked not knowing what was going to be on the next page.
Do you think it's that you liked your experience more, or do you think you actually liked the content within them more?
Oh, that is an excellent question. I think I liked the experience more, but I think I liked the content of the 4th light novel the most.
What about for you, Sarah?
I also find this difficult to answer, especially because the first 4 at this point I am so familiar with. Like, I've watched the anime twice, I've read them twice, I've read part of the manga, so it's like I know that part very well. And I mean, even though this is my second time reading the second set of 4, I feel like there's more of a episodic feeling to the first 4, where you're kind of just like in the rear palace. There's characters popping up every now and then that you already know and that kind of come back, and like that same feeling is sort of in these 4, but also it's different because you're in different places, you're meeting different people, so it just doesn't have the same vibe, I guess, as the first 4 did for me, which is not a bad thing. But I don't know which one I like better.
Yeah, the first 4 kind of had more structure, and it did have more of that mystery of the week feeling until you realize that all of it is actually somewhat connected, or most of it's somewhat connected. Whereas here, you feel like very unanchored because, like you're saying, it's beyond just where a lot of stories you expect to meet new characters at the beginning because it's the beginning. You're getting introduced to everything. But then at some point, I think we're so accustomed to, after a certain point, you basically know everybody. And with Apothecary Diaries, it just kind of keeps expanding. And it also, I think to your point, the setting doesn't necessarily stay with just the rear palace. We go sometimes there, sometimes out of it, sometimes now we're in the West and now we're back. And you really don't know what direction it's going in. So it makes it kind of hard to feel, I think, rooted. But also, I think it sort of fits, especially with Jinshi's role exposed. It kind of goes hand in hand. But it does mean you don't feel as settled in. Is that kind of what you would say reflects your feelings?
Yeah.
What about for you, Christy? Oh, I think we lost your audio. But we'll
Sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Okay, I muted myself because I think I was like coughing or something. Yeah, so I liked what Sean said about liking the content of the first 4, but liking the experience of these 4. I wouldn't say I liked the content of these 4 any less, but what I found especially fun about the first 4 was like trying to figure out all the family tree stuff, which I was mapping it out, the red string connecting or whatever. So it didn't have as much of that in this 4. So like that fun aspect of it was missing, but I still really liked these 4 as well. I feel like in these 4, because we are traveling to other places, we're going to the West, we're discovering so many more other regions and countries that were never mentioned in the first 4. It's become more of like I need a map instead of I need a family tree. And like Sarah said, we're just so intimately familiar with the first 4 because watched the anime so many times and then also read the light novel. So going into these 4 now is such a fresh, brand new experience. And I love that now it's kind of become like when I see a character, it's like, oh my god, like this character is making a comeback. So, like when we first saw Lee Haku again, I was like, yay, he's back. And now I'm just waiting for Xiaolan to come back. I
There
like
was a live studio audience. They'd be like, "Hey, all right, Raku."
yeah, when they
You'd have to
walk
pause to, you know.
I agree with that feeling of being excited when characters come back. I know for myself, I was so excited when there was at least a brief return of Gaoshin, even if it was just for a moment, because Fossen, we like Fossen, but Gaoshin's, I think, a favorite for many of us. But I think for myself, the first 4 had more of a strength in its plot. And I think these ones, they're definitely kind of coming out of just how heavy that was, which I think makes sense. In a lot of things, when you have something that's more explosive, you sort of have that, okay, here's the aftermath of that. So we are kind of settling in. And additionally, we're kind of settling in with characters in different roles because Mao Mao doesn't have a set role anymore. So she's kind of just going all over the place. It's almost like she's in between jobs, that feeling of we don't have the same old routine anymore. And so now she is just floating adrift in a sense, and she kind of has to go wherever she's called. And she also has made so many connections, and everybody values her that she's pulled in so many different directions, and it keeps you on your toes, but keeping you on your toes almost at the expense of feeling like you have that steady plot where something is building and building. You can clearly see there's a lot of things that are happening in this that feel like building blocks, but they don't necessarily come to fruition within these 4. So then you're left thinking, was that the end of that, or is this going to come back? It doesn't feel like we're through with this. And even though I still think it's fair to say you could break a lot of these arcs up into 3 or 4 chunks for each novel, each set of novels. So the first 4, I think, were pretty clear. I definitely think 9, 10, 11, and 12 kind of have their own. So you could say this one has its own, but this one feels like mini arcs that are, I described it in one of our reading sprints as this is somewhat the middle book where it's connecting us from the first and the third. So we kind of have that establishing something to come while also coming away from what really monumental thing occurred at the end of 4.
As a person who has read ahead, would you say that the maybe 5, 6, and 7 are more of a mini arc, and then 8 kind of goes into 9, 10, 11, 12?
Yeah, I think
The 8 I felt like seemed distinct from the other.
I don't disagree at all with that. I also think that 9, 10, 11 have a pretty huge thing, and then 12 ends up kind of feeling like it's wrapping that up. 13 is really short, and it kind of is just so almost another segue type of novel, but then we don't know what's coming next, so I can't really figure out how that fits in later. But I do feel like that's what I was saying. It's kind of like 3 and 4, where sometimes ones feel like they're coming at the tail end of something, or they're getting ready to present us into something new, almost like a prologue, which I don't mind. I think for a lot of us who are accustomed to, in novel form, reading series that are either series or then this is a continuation series or a prequel series, we're very used to some kind of structure. And I actually like when it just kind of keeps on going because of the way that things can build. It doesn't feel like it's beholden to some kind of plot structure that we then learn how to predict things based off of. And so I like that feeling. However, I'm not even a plot-driven reader, so I like the character moments within this, and I like that feeling of I don't know what's to come, but I'm here for the ride because I love the characters so much. But I do feel like the plot was stronger in the first 4. So that's how I'd kind of compare. But I think if we're talking structurally, it's weaker, in my opinion, than the previous ones and certainly the ones to come after. But speaking of characters, do any of you feel differently about our established characters from the first four? And I think this is where we're going to start to get into more specifics. And we'll reverse order this. So, Christy, if you want to kick it off, were there any characters that you felt differently about, that you liked more, that you liked less, or just you feel like you have new information about them?
So just to add one thing to your previous point first, is it makes me wonder how they're gonna, like, if they continue the animation, how they're gonna animate these arcs. Because we definitely have a third season planned, and I feel like we know what the third season is going to be. Like, okay, we're talking full spoilers, right? It's going to be that the whole Lishu arc. I feel like that's going to be one season, but then how are they going to do? Because that's the Lishu one is up until the end of volume 6, right? Okay, sorry, I know that was one of your. We'll talk about more in detail. But then, yeah, how are they going to then do another adaptation after that? Because 7, I feel like it kind of has something to do with the stuff that's introduced in volume 5 and 6, but it kind of ends then, and then again, like you guys said, 8 is like its own thing entirely. So sorry.
You're okay. I think to your point about how it's going to adapt things, and that can actually be a whole talking point. Maybe even toward the end, we can really dissect how we think it would be broken down. But I think the end of 8 feels like enough of a pulling you along. But something I think that first off, I think the anime is adapted really, really closely to the light novels. And I think that they trust that in this case, the viewers, if we're talking about the anime, they've established that just being with our characters is something a lot of people enjoy, because some of our favorite moments are just Mao Mao investigating various herbs or getting excited about mushrooms or something of that sort, or making the little ice cream with Xiaolin and Lulan. And so we enjoy those smaller moments. So when the bigger moments happen, which we have now learned to trust that those will come about, I think a lot of times a lot of us are okay with that. So I wonder if they'll just keep to that structure. I've wondered that as well, though, if they're going to cut things, but they haven't so far. And the very first season of the anime just kind of is like, well, I don't know, that didn't conclude very well as far as, again, if we're talking structure, we leave off with, well, I don't know who was responsible for trying to assassinate Jinshi. And I guess the very end of this is going to be some family stuff with Mao Mao. And then that's it. Like we kind of end with this. It didn't feel like a lot of the bigger things got resolved. So I wonder if they trust that we trust them to continuously adapt and that we're going to stick with it. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Of course, feel free to add to that, but kind of returning to this just to make sure we don't skip over your thoughts on the characters, Christy.
Okay, yeah, sorry for derailing temporarily. Okay, so obviously I love Lock-On so much. Every scene, I feel like every scene Lock-On is in, he just steals the show for me. I love him. I love him even more now.
Is that the feeling different? You love him more than you loved him previously?
Yeah, that's
marginally more. Okay.
And then there's if we're talking about only characters that we've seen before, not any new characters. So previously, I was just kind of like, whatever about Basen, oh my god, yes, that's my favorite scene. In the background. Ugh, yeah, I love him. Yeah, previously I was all whatever about Basen. He was just kind of there, background character or whatever, don't care. I like him more now that we know more about his character and I can see how actually stupid he is. I'm like, yeah, that appeals to me. Okay. Again, one of the best scenes. We'll talk about that scene. And then again, also, I just feel like there's a lot of characters who were previously more background, like Lishu. She was also there. Like you feel a little bit for her because of her circumstances, but you don't know too much about her. But in these volumes, I really like just felt for Lishu, and I I like her a lot now, and I want to see her find her happiness.
Yeah, she really goes through it in these.
Yeah.
It was nice that through her we got more Azuo too, a little bit.
I don't think I like any character less after these novels. It's just the ones that I love even more, and the ones that I was more indifferent about, I like them more now.
Sarah, what about for you?
I agree with those were the three that I thought of that I was like, those are the ones I like more after these ones, especially since I just finished reading this morning. The whole like Go tournament and Lacan and like him basically doing that to like maybe not preserve her memory, but like be reminded of I don't even remember her name, but Mao Mao's mother. Like all of that, just like what?
But I think it's Feng Xian.
Yeah, all of that just kills me. Like he is weird, but he deserves to be happy too. Like I don't know, it's just so sad to me. And then I obviously understand why Mao Mao feels the way she does about him, but him just wanting to like be with his daughter makes me so sad.
No, the whole thing with the Law Clan and how she was kind of the only person to snap him out of it, because especially if he's already grieving and he doesn't really recognize faces anyway, and he has none of his usual people there to help him, he clearly doesn't care that he's almost being held prisoner and is just suffering and allowing himself to descend basically into madness until he sees her, and she's just so put off and like about her dad. And it's kind of sad. I actually do want to return to that scene in a moment, and maybe we'll segue into talking about the Law Clan, because there's so much to talk about with these four, and I think it's very easy to overlook the Law Clan section because it is so brief and it kind of happens before some of the more monumental things we get later. But I do really like that section. I want to make sure we return to it. Sean, what about for you? Do you feel differently about any of the characters?
I think I've been slow on the suspicious of what's her face, Empress
Gyokyo?
that was their name. I just call her G in my head. I don't think she's bad, and I know we'll talk about her dad and her brother, the little we know of them later, but I also don't know if I trust her 100%. There's things going on there that I don't know. I used to kind of just think like, she's harmless, and now I'm like, no, she's a plotter. So I don't know how I feel about her. I thought the salt crystal thing was weird. I mean, she was like going behind Hong Yong's back a little bit, and how that salt crystal ended up, how her headpin and hairpin ended up in the soup. I don't know. A lot of questions. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about her. And then who are we just talking about? Oh, so minor thing. Jinshi and the cheating and Go. Can I just say, in the words of gamers everywhere, get good, man. I'm kind of like, really? You couldn't just I mean, I didn't want him to win. I think Elle brought that up. It would have been stupid if he had just like gotten amazing in like a week or whatever. But also I'm like, but you gotta cheat. Come on. Like, at least give it your best and move on. I was kind of disappointed. A little disappointed.
I was like, oh, he's going through all of these, like he's cheating, but then Mama pointed out, like, when he's in the rear palace, he's not above using not so straight means to get what he wants. I'm like, that's a good point.
That's true. That didn't make me like him anymore. I was more like, hey, yeah, that's right.
Mao Mao also gets him drunk. So if he got the idea from anybody, he got it from Mao Mao, because she did that.
But he also, I mean, I didn't I didn't like that, but he also kind of cheated in his previous match. His like, oh, by the way, I'm gorgeous. You know, like.
Well, if they can't focus on the game, that's their own fault. You know, you gotta learn how to stay
That's
focused.
true. That one I'll give you, but the just drugging your opponent essentially is
I mean,
No, he
for it.
drugged himself. Okay.
yeah, since you never said you could have any.
He did. He just put it in the middle because he knew Lacan would go, because Lacan's always stealing people's snacks. Maybe this should teach him a lesson. Stop stealing people's food.
Yeah,
Not always
you guys
good.
are just rationalizing the cheating.
Also, Mao Mao was the one who put it there. He was just like, I need snacks. That's all he said.
Rationalizing the cheating.
Were there other characters, Sean, you wanted to mention?
Not really. I mean, I think Lacan is weird. I don't think that makes me love him anymore. I think I'm just kind of like, he's just kind of a odd guy. I do feel bad for him. That he doesn't have a relationship with his daughter. He wants one, but that's kind of inconsistent. I don't know if that's changed for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else. More just I'm very suspicious of
Kyokyo.
the Empress. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you're slow on the uptake, because we've talked about Gyokyo in previous discussions.
I
so
know,
much.
that's what I'm saying. And I feel like I've been like, she's fine. Now I'm not so sure.
I do think that it made me feel worse for her, because I think before, with how much of this feeling of having a tight-knit community around her, with her ladies in waiting always being people that she knew from where she was from, I thought that maybe it was one of those, oh, I'm a fish out of water. I'm in this dangerous place surrounded by these other people, so let me have some of my people here with me that I feel I can trust. And now I feel like she has also had to escape something that seems very maybe even dangerous for her, given how we've kind of gotten hints of how her brother feels about her. Her dad seemed nice, so you're like, well, her dad seems okay.
I'm suspicious of her dad.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can't tell if he's like nice and he's just playing the game, or if he's genuinely kind of a jolly person. Obviously, of course, as Sean pointed out, I have read further, so these are all of my feelings I had after these 4. So that was my feeling of like, I think he seems nice, but I'm always concerned when somebody seems nice, that are they actually up to no good?
I find it very suspicious that he specifically, like, he didn't request Rikusen by name, but he very specifically requested, like, he all but named him when he was like, send someone to the west. I feel like her, before how I felt about Gyokyo, I was like, oh, I'm suspicious of her. I don't know what her goal is. I don't know what she's playing at. But I feel like now I'm less suspicious of her, knowing that she was put into these circumstances pretty much against her will. And even the few ladies in waiting that she has, it's not because of anything in her control. It's because her brother refused to send her anymore. So she's very much like under their foot. But I like her more now, and I'm less suspicious of her, because after she read the letter, she very obviously rejected whatever proposal her brother had.
I just was left feeling more like maybe it's less her and more that the area she's from is a dangerous place, and that they might be up to more. But also, does that mean she's a pawn? Because we also saw with Sure before, a lot of us came to, I think, feel really bad for Sure. And I actually loved that moment when they're in the West and Sure and Mao Mao are both kind of just the people that know about medicine. I really liked their interactions, as brief as they were. But Sure is one of those characters that she was kind of being used by people above her. And then you find out the level of abuse that she was experiencing and how she kind of had no say or any control, even though obviously if her acts had been successful, it would have led to the death of one of our most pivotal, important characters. So even though the repercussions would have been so bad, it's almost like you don't want it to be all put on her. And luckily, a lot of our characters, part of why we like Auduo so much, and we feel like the Emperor maybe is a decent Emperor and things like that, is because they're willing to see the nuance of things. So with Gyokyu, I definitely think that it feels like maybe there's something similar there, where maybe she is a pawn. Maybe some of what she does is for her trying to look out for herself, or what if it's to report back? You know, you don't really know, but I don't know that I came away from it feeling like she's trying to destabilize this whole region or that she's trying to sneak in. Go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I just want to say, like, I don't think that. Like, I think if there's a danger, it's probably her brother, and she clearly doesn't really care for him. I just think I more mean, like, she is not above deception, I think is more what I'm getting at. Like, and you guys might have to help me out remembering the scene, but with the salt, like, is it Hoku one of those who is like basically like chastising her, like, you need to be more careful, you know, people might be after you, and she kind of has like this, oh, I didn't even think about that, but then I was like, but it kind of seems like you might have been behind this, you know, like, and maybe she wasn't, but like, I'm like, what games are you playing? I don't quite know. I guess, like, if you're deceiving potentially your own ladies in waiting, or if it's kind of staged, I don't know. I'm like, for whom is it staged? What is this? What is the purpose?
It's more like she always just wanted to have fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make the best of the situation, and this is, I guess, one of them. I don't know why. Yeah, the salt thing is weird. I think she just wanted to have a little fun, but at the end of this arc, these volumes, we see she realizes that she can no longer just operate that way. She needs to think things through and be more careful. And I've mentioned, I don't know if I've mentioned on the live chat, or just in our discussions, like on Boxer, but there are so many similarities that I see between this series and the Dandelion Dynasty, because in the Dandelion Dynasty, there's also a character who lives by the the personal philosophy, like, always do the most interesting thing, and that's just how I feel like that's what Gyokyo is like.
You just piqued Sean's interest so much with that.
It's a dangerous philosophy.
Whoa. Do I need to read this series?
No, it's very philosophy.
I will add that I do think, and this actually comes into the picture for some other parts of the discussion we'll have, including the very end of Volume 8. I think there is a level of Gyokyo, one, kind of always trying to see how people react to things and kind of assess situations. I think she's very good at that. I also think she misses Mao Mao, and she wants Mao Mao back in her camp, because as much as the other ladies in waiting are capable in their own ways, Mao Mao is such a valuable asset to her crew, and I think she really wants her back as much as possible. And I think there is a fear. This was something I thought after the first 4, and once she's had a son, and after everything she's gone through, after what happened to Lady Li Hua, I think there is this fear of anybody who presents a threat, or anybody who, now that we have additional information about her brother, anybody who maybe other people could get behind and be seen as an adversary to her and her son, because she obviously clearly loves her children a lot. So I think there's a level of Mao Mao being so valuable, and if Mao Mao is more so associated with Jinshi, and there being like the idea of, well, now we know whose daughter she is, and Lacan in the past hasn't really associated with any one particular faction. So if you get him kind of under your thumb, and you have the what we at this time, it's still thought to be the Emperor's brother. So if it's like people want to get behind the Emperor's brother instead, especially after what he did to the Shi clan, there's all these things that even if he himself, even if Jinshi doesn't present a certain way, you know, there are people who would still want to get behind him. Now also Li Hua has her own son. So then there's like, if something happens to Gyokyu's son, they could very easily try to push her out, especially because there's the whole like, well, she's foreign, and this one is closer to what we think of when we think of Li, meaning Lady Li Hua. So the fact that there's all these other potential threats, I think it's really got her, like what you were saying, Christy, it's got her on edge, realizing like, I have to really hyper focus on ensuring my safety and the safety of my children. And I think she's very cunning and she's very clever, like what you were saying, Sean. She's not necessarily as sweet and innocent as maybe she appears all the time, but I think it's just so much from a sense of self-preservation more than anything. That was my take. Sarah, we've kind of been talking a lot about this. Do you want to chime in really quick?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not necessarily suspicious of her, but there does feel like there's more to the hairpin thing. But I kind of just took it as she was bored. Like, she just like wanted something to do. Like, she missed Mau Mau, and she had an interesting comment at the end too, with the whole branding scene. She thinks about how she's jealous of Mau Mau being free, basically. And I thought that was a very interesting comment because she had made a comment like that, like all the way at the beginning. Like
episode 2, right?
Yeah. And that might have been like the second or third chapter of the light novel, like wondering what it would be like to be free or like free to love basically who she chose. So I thought that was a very interesting comment for her to make. Or, well, she didn't make it. I think she just thought it. So I think there could be more to that kind of like within her.
And I said before, I want to make sure we return to the law stuff, the Law Clan stuff. But since we're already on this topic, we won't necessarily talk about all the repercussions, potential repercussions, and also just the intensity of the end of Volume 8 just yet. But I do want to note, because I think it ties to what you're saying, Sarah, about Lady Gyokyu says something to the effect of, well, this is partially your fault, Mau Mau, about Jinshi branding himself. And Mau Mau's like, in Mau Mau fashion, she's like, the hell it is. Like, what are you talking about? And I do think there is this level, like you're saying, of Gyokyu, whether she is kind of imposing onto Mau Mau her own perception of what she wants for herself, or maybe she's observing something that Mau Mau is, in her narration, somewhat suppressing, because we know she does that. But regardless, it would seem that Gyokyu's reality has told her that Mau Mau is pursuing this path of her choosing what she wants to choose, her doing what she's passionate about, and maybe even defying all odds and marrying potentially, you know, this beautiful man that also happens to be in close proximity to the emperor. Like, it goes against it's, and they bring in that romance novel at one point in the story, not necessarily in association with Lady Gyokyu, but that whole idea of this like romantic epic that basically sounds like Romeo and Juliet earlier. And both Mau Mau and Jinshi are like, I don't understand the appeal of this, for their own reasons that I think shows a lot about their characters. But in Lady Gyokyu's case, I feel like there is this level of her wanting to romanticize her life and then thinking grass is greener when she sees someone like Mau Mau, who she thinks is almost like, and ironically, because she is sort of the main character of Apothecary Diaries, but she sees her as like, she's living as the main character of her own life. And I'm always the side character. I'm always answering to someone else who has more power, somebody else who has more agency. So I think that that comment, which we'll get further into as I noted, I think that comment at the end of 8 maybe showcases even more of your feelings, Sarah, about how Lady Gyokyu feels. Do any of you want to chime in about that moment, or should we wait for when we talk about that scene and talk about the Law Clan first? Maybe Law Clan, because I feel like there's just too much to talk about with the end of Volume 8 and a number of other things, of course. So the Law Clan, there is a moment within that section that I felt was one of the most illuminating things about Mau Mau. So obviously you find out that her mother has died. And Lahan, even as much as he's an idiot, and I do love their dynamics, I will say, about feeling differently about characters. I don't know that I feel differently about Lahan, but I love seeing how they immediately go into like annoying brother-sister mode all the time. But for once, I feel like he actually is kind of like, hey, you know, you okay? You need to cry or something? And she's like, I don't have feelings about this, which is debatable whether she does or does not. But she thinks about she and I think this is a habit for Mau Mau, that when she has an opportunity to reflect on how she feels, rather than thinking how she feels, she starts to think about how other people react to situations, and then she thinks of herself in reference to that, rather than just being like, here's how I feel. So she does this when she's thinking about Loman and how when you treat somebody, you can't always just break down and cry, because that's stupid, because then you're going to be sad all the time. And then she thinks about, well, some people are just that stupid. For some people, they never get over it. And she specifically thinks about her dad and how he does always pretty much find a reason to cry, and he does feel it. And even though she thinks it's dumb, it's also why she respects him so much. So there's a quote: although there are some who shed tears every time, she thought, some who, although they might do better to get used to it, never did, some who never learned to simply accept it, some, like her adoptive father, she thought it was inept, stupid, but that was exactly why she respected him so much. I think she wants to be able to basically emote. I think somewhere in her, she wants to be able to have the ability to express herself in more than just excitement about poisons and herbs and other such things. I think she wants to be able to tap into that, but maybe she's one of those types that's so deep down actually maybe truly sensitive that it's just easier to operate under this presentation of having no feelings, trying to convince herself she has no feelings and live in that way, when really I think she actually does. Like we see when she's alone and she reads that letter from Xiaolin and she cries. And you're like, yeah, you do have that in you. You do get really sad. Of course you do. But I think she resists. We also know that her circumstances have backed this up because of what she says after the infamous frog scene when Jinchi comes and she thinks, when he goes to apologize and give her the ox bezoars. But she thinks, I used to just cry and cry and cry, and nobody ever came. So I just learned there's no point in crying. So she obviously has things that have reinforced this, but I think she's shut that off so much that she doesn't really let herself feel anything, even though I think she actually deeply respects people who are willing to be sensitive. I think that's why she's drawn to Xiaolin. I think it's why she actually likes Lady Gyokyu as well. And I think it shows why she tends to like the people that she likes, because she likes Gaoshin as well, and he's a big softie. So I think it really illuminated for me a lot about her. And then, of course, there's all the other circumstances about the Law clan itself. The fact that apparently Lacan's brother is really sweet and just a nice farmer, and you're like, I love this guy, and I've met him like one time. The grandfather is awful. Loman, when she like dumps the water on the guy for talking about Loman, and you're like, yes, that moment was great. But I do feel like that whole scene showcased a lot more in really subtle ways. It wasn't necessarily just telling you. But I kind of went on and on and on about that moment. Sarah, let's make sure you get to chat about this.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on the whole Law clan moment?
Well, since you mentioned Lahan's father, like his actual father, I know that this is set in like China or like fictional China, but I pictured him as like a lumberjack. Like, I was like, there's nothing to convince me that this man is not like just like a big guy
wearing a flannel.
Yes, with like a big beard and like maybe an axe or something. Like that was absolutely how I pictured him. I hope we get to see him again because I really liked him. But yeah, just that whole scene, it does kind of get lost with the other stuff that happens, I feel like, because even with Lacan's like reaction that we kind of talked about earlier of him just like not being able to like, he doesn't know where he is, he doesn't know who anybody around him is, just that whole thing, it's just so sad to me. And yeah, I don't know, I hadn't thought too much about Mao Mao's reaction to that, so I enjoyed hearing your thoughts on that.
Oh, thanks. Christy, what about for you?
Yeah, I like that whole arc. Because before, when we ever hear about the Law clan and passing, and we know that Lacan basically ousted everyone, kicked them out of the capital, and took over, it felt like the whole family was very scheming, very conniving. I thought that Lahan's father would be very resentful towards Lacan for basically taking his son away. But seeing this, we get more insight and we see that's not the case. It's really just the grandfather who's terrible. And yeah, Lahan's biological father is so cute, and the way that he's just devoted to farming, and he works so hard, and also his other son, who has a bit more of like is more grumpy, and he complains about having to do this, but then we also see that he works very hard, and he complains about it, but he still enjoys what he's doing. I really like this whole insight into the La clan. And I agree with everything you said before, Elle, about how Mao Mao feels. I really like that quote as well, because it shows that she doesn't just think, well, she says like, oh, emotions and all that is stupid, but the fact that she respects people who still are able to empathize so much, I think really shows how she actually feels. And one of my favorite, okay, so a little bit off topic, but one of my favorite scenes in this section was when the grandfather is getting all like worked up, and he's brandishing his sword cane, and then the narration is like, you got a useless strategist, basically a human abacus, and Mao Mao, and then it goes, the three wusses scattered. I love that they don't even try to fight back. They're like, yeah, we're cowards. We're not dealing with this.
Sean, what about for you?
I'm gonna be the bummer. It was probably like one of my least favorite parts of these four. I was like, okay, I sometimes I need a little bit more semblance of realism, and I just felt like Lacan's like total. I get he's sad, but just like, I don't even know where I am. Like, you were kidnapped and you don't realize you were kidnapped. I guess I was like, really? Like, I don't think you would just be like, well, I guess this is where I live now. Like, I just was like, I don't find that compelling. I thought it was weird that like Lahan had to be like, we got to go track down my dad because we don't know where he went. Like, I guess I would have found that interesting if they had found Lacan like kicking and screaming like, how dare you, but him just being like, that it's gonna be sad and lay down. I was like, okay.
He was in a catatonic state, right? Because
no, but even that, I was like, how did that happen?
So apparently if I died, you would just be fine. I'm just kidding.
No, but if someone kidnapped me, I'd be like, hey, I'm being kidnapped. I wouldn't just be like, well.
So I actually did want to add in Sean's defense here. So for me, this is less about this scene in particular, because when we were talking about characters that maybe we feel differently about, or that we feel like we learned more about within these volumes, I feel like we realize, how Mao Mao always refers to him as a freak, and an idiot, basically. I'm like, oh, he is like completely off the walls. He has, I think, no semblance of reality most of the time. So this to me didn't feel outside of his character necessarily. I think he just is completely outside of what the rest of society views as normal behavior.
The only reason I'm gonna interject is like, he's still, it's not just that he's really good at Go and shogi and he just has like this amazing mind for games. He commands troops and officers and tells them where to go, and presumably is very good at it. I guess I'm just like, he is a leader of people, of a lot of people, and I guess I just thought like, if kidnapping your chief strategist is this easy, I don't really understand that. So I don't know. Not to cut you off.
They talk. Oh no, you're fine. They talk about pretty often how he is pretty useless unless there's conflict, and I think because of how high up he is supposed to be able to govern his own guards and things like that, because who, except for maybe the emperor, is going to do that for him? And usually Lahan is there, or usually Riku-san is there, and then when both of them are gone, and then he suddenly goes into this insane level of depression.
Yeah,
to
he
a point,
dismissed everybody during
yeah,
that
just
time.
I think he almost in a very sad way, I think he didn't care anymore what happened to him, but I don't disagree that somebody should have been like, wait, we should probably, I think there is a level of like, well, when the fox is away, let's take advantage of this, because I think some people who have to usually work under him have articulated that it is not easy to manage him because he is basically a giant child that just does whatever he wants with these glimpses of brilliance, which I think it makes him so valuable when there is conflict. And also, there is a level of him that just almost like in a supernatural way can assess someone's character too. So he's really good for that. But these things come also at the expense of him acting like a functioning member of society oftentimes. But it is one of those things where I think some of his behavior gets played up for laughs. And in your defense, Sean, of your feelings about this scene, I think it was like the most extreme version of his being off the walls in a moment where you like kind of were wanting it to be slightly less, oh, family craziness. And I think that that's fair. For me, the moment stood out because of, I think, most of the stuff with Mao Mao, and also getting glimpses into some of these other family members that I was like, I hope we get to see some of these people again, because I would really enjoy that. Chrissy, were you about to chime in for a sec there?
Oh, just one more thing about Lakan. He's the one who contacted his family to come because he wanted to introduce them to his wife. And I just find so not a lot in this book in this series like makes me like super emotional, but just the everything, all the circumstances surrounding Lakan and his wife just makes me so sad. I was tearing up because even though he had all of this tumultuous relationship with his family and his father, he still wanted to introduce them to his wife. But then by the time they came, she had already passed away. And then even Lahan's father, when he says Lakan always was a romantic, I was like, it hurts so much.
And it also, I think it makes his love very pure, because I think a lot of people, and even Mao Mao with her constant pragmatism, thinks, I don't know why it would have made more sense to pick Mei Mei. And instead, it's stupid that he's wasting all this money. She can't even really hardly, she has these thoughts that seem callous, but realistically, most people, especially in their society, aren't going to spend that amount of money on someone who is probably going to die soon, who isn't necessarily anymore able to have what they had before in how they operated and how they thought and how they expressed themselves. She obviously isn't able to do that much anymore, but he always loved her. And I think there's a part of him that could kind of, he almost doesn't see any of that. He just sees this person. And I think that's also why he just loves Mao Mao so much, to a point where he seems oblivious to how much Mao Mao doesn't want him around. It's just like, that's my daughter. That's my Mao Mao. I love her so much. So it makes his love very pure, but he is very different. He definitely is very different. But I wanted to mention another scene that happens around the Go tournament that I do actually want to go from this into the concept of Mao Mao as an unreliable narrator, because I think that's a point that comes up a lot when dissecting her character as, is she or is she not? And one of the scenes that stood out to me is when she's looking at the book that he made and she sees these two cats. And maybe this is me just like hyper analyzing it, but a lot of times, because I think it specifically notes that both the cats are calico cats in this little drawing, and I think almost always calico cats are girls. So I think in his mind, this was like what he had hoped he would get to have, which was his wife and his daughter playing Go together. And Mao Mao, it says very distinctly, like, Mao Mao chose to ignore that part. And then it's funny because it's like, you know how the internet will frame things like me, and then it'll be something, and it's like my friend, and it'll say something or whatever. In this instance, it feels like we were to break this into a internet almost meme. It'd be like, Mao Mao chooses to ignore it, flips page, Mao Mao's staring directly at it. Like she's looking right at it, while also you just got told she's choosing to ignore it. And she looks kind of sad. So I think that once again, there's this level of she is, I think, trying to push down these feelings. I think they're very complicated feelings. Even if somebody's situation is very different, which most people's situations would be different from the specifics of hers, there is still that pain of when you have a family member die who you know most of the time based off of what a quote unquote good family unit is supposed to be, that you it's like there's this idea of maybe it would have been nice to have this relationship with her mother. And I think she came to terms with the fact, oh, I'm never going to have that. But then seeing like this vision that her father had for potentially even or if you want to view it as like that was him and his wife, I still think there's a level of her maybe mourning this thing that was never going to be, even though she insists that she's not paying all that much attention to it. And then again, this can segue into the unreliable narrator concept, but I don't want to come away from this moment too soon. Christy, since you were talking about the things that made you a little teary-eyed, was this moment something that kind of got you a little bit, or did you not think too much about it?
Yeah, I didn't think too much about it, to be honest. But knowing that, because I didn't know that about Calico Cats, but knowing that that is so cute, and I can definitely see that being part of his thought process. But when it says, I think this is showing her, oh, she saw the picture, but then she's just gonna ignore it. It's not like I didn't think of it as she's choosing to ignore it, but then very clearly she's not ignoring it. I think I was thinking is more the other way around. Like she saw it and she's like, oh, whatever, ignore.
But what is the reason you think she would ignore it?
She doesn't want to think about, like, probably because if she doesn't want to think about it, because if she allows herself to think about it, then she has to admit that she cares, which she pretends that she doesn't.
I think anytime information comes into her head that's like, this might make you feel things, she's like, well, I'm not going to think about it then. I think she does that a lot, which is something I think a lot of people do, and it's very relatable. Sean, did you have any thoughts about this moment?
I think I had zero thoughts on this moment. I think I was like, huh, okay.
Well, since hearing my interpretation of it, did you have any thoughts then?
I don't know. I think, I mean, I guess it does kind of go into the unreliable narrator thing. I mean, she's not narrating. So we kind of have to take the author somewhat at her word. So I don't know. I think if Mao Mao chose to ignore it, it might be because I mean, not to be too harsh, but I don't think she cared for her mom. Like,
yeah, I don't
like, so there's obviously probably pain there. Like, I didn't have a relationship with my mom, but her mom was like straight up abusive, you know, and so if it was like that's what it could have been, right? If that's like some imagined like how the family should have been thing, that's not what it was. Like I could see being like, well, I'm gonna ignore this, you know, why give it much thought more than that? And I guess, like, I don't know. I don't know if I think of her as an unreliable narrator, because it's just like we don't really get her thoughts. We're just told like her actions, and occasionally she thinks things and says things, but I don't know if we can take that and then say, oh, she's being deceptive, because we can only really take her at her.
Yeah, do you think, just out of curiosity then, do you think you can't have an unreliable narrator if it is told in third person?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess you can, but why would the omniscient narrator deceive?
I think
because then you have to, like,
it's still third person close though.
Yeah.
So it's third person that is when you're with that character, you are kind of going into the frame, just like when we're with Lahan, everything, if you get a Lahan perspective, everything's broken apart into like, this was this size and it was this many of this. And, you know, and it's like read as if it's Lahan, even though it's third person. So there's a slight shift in the tone. And I think with Mao Mao, kind of what Sarah would point out a lot about, did Mao Mao know who Jinshi was much sooner? And there's a lot of indications, and a lot of times those indications are she didn't want to think about it too much. And it's like, maybe because if we were to have first person, it would show how much there's actually the thought there. But Mao Mao, her brain is basically like, the narrator is telling you she is willfully ignoring this information as best as possible. So I think there's a...
But I don't know if I think that's an unreliable narrator, though.
I think
I
it's
guess I just
like...
think that means that's who she is. Anything that challenges her at all, that any information that she doesn't want to hear, she's going to say, I'm going to ignore that. But I don't know if that makes her unreliable. That just means she's deceiving. Well, I don't even know if it means she's deceiving herself. She just, whatever thing that makes her have to like get outside of her comfort zone, I'm going to ignore that, which I feel like is somewhat normal. I mean, I think it's actually kind of normal thing to do.
I think that's a good point, because it actually is something I was going to add to that, which is that I think every person to some degree is unreliable. It's like when there's some kind of event and they ask you, hey, what happened? They have to get so many witnesses, and there are going to be discrepancies in people's memories because of the fact that all of us, our memories are unreliable for the most part. Or if you take like those personality tests, they say, you know, have you take one and then have someone who knows you closely take it, for like as if they're answering for what they see from you. And a lot of times it is somewhere in the middle is the truth. And I think that's kind of the situation with Mao Mao, where a lot of what we get from her, we feel a certain way about. But then if you sit back and you're like, okay, if I was there, is that how I would interpret that information, or would there be something else? And I think it's not unreliable in the same way like a mystery novel where it turns out someone's experiencing like this, wait a second, I don't even think, or you have some kind of a person reflecting on their life, but maybe they're actually lying to you. So you have to figure out, are they telling the truth or are they lying? It's maybe not that extreme, but I do think there is a level of, because most of the time we follow Mao Mao, we also know that she has a tendency to, you could almost say like lie to herself or ignore certain things. And then you have to ask, like, I think there's more there. But Christy, you were going to say something earlier, so I want to make sure we don't completely cover that.
Yeah, not too different to what you guys were saying. It's one of those, I feel like it's one of those things where, yeah, she'll ignore it on purpose, because to not ignore it is to acknowledge it, and she doesn't want to acknowledge certain things. Like if we're talking about the image, the illustration of the calico cats, which again, we don't know if that is the intention there, but based on that interpretation, to acknowledge it, and would be, because she doesn't want to admit that Lakan is her father, right? She'll go through so much length to ignore him and be like, he's a stranger to me. But if she allows herself to think about it more, she kind of would be forced to acknowledge that he's not just a stranger, that kind of thing. And then that just opens up like a whole, and then the whole Jinshi thing, like, just opens up a whole can of worms if she allows herself to acknowledge certain things.
I think there's also a danger in talking about, and of course this can apply to male characters as well, so I don't want to say that that's not true, but when you talk about the potential of a female character being an unreliable narrator, it can accidentally feed into some really problematic things that get perpetuated. So I think, as an example, when you talk about Gyokyo saying to Mao Mao, hey, this is somewhat on you, and Mao Mao's like, how is this on me? If there's like well, she says she doesn't want it, but she wants it, don't listen to what she's saying. It's like, that weird gross thing that sometimes people will say where you're like, what? No, you should listen to what they're saying. Even if maybe there's a disconnect, still just listen to what they're saying and respect that. So I think it's tricky to navigate that, because on the topic of Mao Mao not wanting to acknowledge certain feelings, I think sometimes Mao Mao is very afraid to care about other people. There's one person that she lets herself care about deeply, and it's her father, and is pretty much the only one she openly cares about. Everyone else, even Xiaolin, who she clearly treated kind of like this little sister, and she clearly has like this like of Xiaolin. And then look what happened. They were separated, and I think that's why that got to her so much, because she actually allowed herself to have this friend and this close relationship. And it was so pure and sweet. Like she didn't resist. She just kind of would ruffle her hair, and she was excited to teach her and things like that. And she was genuinely proud of her and would check in on how she's doing at school. And then now that relationship is lost, and I think that's so painful for her. Christy, am I making you sad? You look sad right now.
No, I'm just thinking about Mao Mao checking in on her little sister at school. This is so cute.
It was so cute. So I think there is sometimes a level of maybe she is developing feelings, and it doesn't even have to be in, obviously it doesn't have to just be in relation to Jinshi, because I think it's the one we jumped to first. But even with Laolin, she was starting to feel like, hey, maybe this is my friend. And there she has those complicated, I thought we were friends. And there's a passage even in this about her thinking about Xiaolin and Lulan in the new trio, and like how I've had friends before. And when she thinks about them, and anytime she thinks about them, which is not very often, I think probably intentionally so, but when she does, it always is really gutting. And anyway, the point being that I think Mao Mao is actually potentially very deeply sentimental. She just doesn't show it necessarily. And I think it's because of there's a fear of pain, which makes sense given the Verdigris house. There's like this, you're only valuable for so long and then you leave, or something you go. She has this awareness that like, well, life changes and you're not going to have what you want all the time. And she has a lot of those sorts of feelings. And then she also sees the repercussions of what looks to be love, and how she always thinks these stories are unrealistic and stupid, and that's never how it actually works. And I think what happened between her parents is almost like this cautionary tale she lives by. So then the idea of caring for someone deeply, I think she is very afraid to do that. But it also means that it can be hard to tell maybe when she actually does care. I don't even know if she's always aware of when she cares. And I think she surprises herself sometimes.
I feel like this is very much like I'm reading the text and you're reading the subtext. I guess like sometimes I'm like, maybe we need to read the text. That's kind of what I'm wondering. Like there's a lot of deep thinking about Mao Mao's inner life that we don't really get. I don't know if we get that textually, but I'll consider it.
It's called Show Don't Tell. Okay. No, I know. I know sometimes it's a lot of conjecture. It's not necessarily fact.
I will say though, you did remind me of one of my favorite scenes though, where Mao Mao brings Yao and then whoever, those who we haven't even talked about yet. But she brings them to a place she likes to eat, and the lady there is like, Mao Mao, you have friends? Like, did you bring friends? And then she's like, get out of here, basically, like ruining my vibe. I like
Don't embarrass me, Mom.
Yeah. Like, of course I have friends.
Yeah.
Although then I think she does think like, are they my friends? Like does that thing. So
it is a similar moment that abruptly she found herself thinking about a cheerful young woman who had loved insects, a young woman who had vanished into the snow and never been found. Mao Mao occasionally peeked into the shops, wondering if one day she might stumble upon the hair sticks she'd given that girl. She'd given that girl. Yeah, it's so sad. She also thinks of Xiaolin too, and wonders, I wonder where she is now, which is devastating to think like, oh, I miss them. Sarah, though, where would you say you lean on is Mao Mao an unreliable narrator? Because you were the one that was really hyper-guessing. Did she know sooner?
She, to me, is absolutely an unreliable narrator. Like, I think that we're close enough to her that we can take like the narrator as being her, or whoever's point of view we're in, because I don't know, it's just so like, I feel like it's coded to her when it's her point of view. But that quote you mentioned from Gyokyo about like Mao Mao chose this, or this is Mao Mao's fault, that kind of had me thinking about like how Mao Mao views her actions or like her feelings versus how other people are viewing her actions. Because there are two things that kind of reminded me of in volume 7, right before Mao Mao and Jinji have their like big conversation. I can't remember if it was before or after Jinji had like talked about how he was not getting any sleep or anything. But even before that, Mama had noticed like, oh, he looks so tired, he's not getting any sleep. She makes him tea to help him sleep, which I was like, she just like made it. She didn't say like, oh, do you want this? She's like, I'm just gonna make him tea to help him sleep, because she notices that he's not getting enough sleep. And then also when he gives himself the brand, she immediately rushes to like go help him. She doesn't even think about it. She doesn't question if she should be helping him. Nothing. She just immediately goes and helps him. So like that quote from Gyokyo is making me think like, are people viewing Mao Mao's actions differently than Mao Mao's viewing them? Like, people can see that she cares about Jinshi even though she's not admitting to herself that she cares about him. So like that's at least how I took Gyokyo's quote.
And meanwhile, I didn't like that quote.
Yeah.
I was actually like, how dare she?
Yeah, and I do think there's something too, and this is why I'll call it a lack of communication rather than miscommunication, which I think is very common in any kind of historical fiction or Regency era story. It always does, I would say, favor the people in positions of power. And obviously that is a dynamic between Mao Mao and Jinshi, is that he has so much more status. And Christy, you've brought up before, and if you want to elaborate, the idea of within the first season, when they have to let people go, did you want to bring up that point again, how like there's that kind of lack of communication with the with letting her go or pretending you don't see her name, that part?
Oh yeah. The whole dynamic between Jinshi and Mao Mao it's a really complicated dynamic, because he has the power to order her, to get her to do what he wants, but he doesn't want to do that, because, and then we see that very clearly in the first season, when Mao Mao and other people were being let go because their families were associated with Ado's lady in waiting, who the whole honey plot, right? So everyone who was associated with her was being let go, and Jinshi had the opportunity to he saw Mao Mao's name. He had the opportunity to ignore Mao Mao's name, pretend it wasn't there, because if he did that, then he can ensure that she stays in the rear palace. But he also knows at the same time that if he did that, it would basically ruin their relationship, because it would kind of establish, you know, I can order you. I'm technically like your superior. I can get you to do whatever I want. So instead, what Jinshi, so even though he knew that he had the power to do that, he let her go, even though it was against what both of them wanted, because she also wanted to stay, but then he wanted her to stay, but neither of them knew. Like, he thought that she wanted to go, but he, you know what I mean? So yeah, that was one of the funniest scenes, because it's like, you guys both want the same thing, but you're just not communicating.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of us point to lack of communication and miscommunication as things that irritate us in stories. But I think what actually irritates us is when it's a very forced situation. I think like when miscommunication happens for no reason. Someone just overhears and then assumes, and where it's very much because we need this plot to happen over here, so we just kind of manufacture something. But the reason in a lot of historical fiction it ends up being realistic to the plot, and I think this is true of Apothecary Diaries, is first off of the status aspect of things, but then also what is considered proper. They don't have time to talk just one-on-one hardly ever, unless other people are going out of their way to ensure that occurs. But then that's a level of trust that you have to grant to all these other people, circumstances have to be just right. Half the time they're very, very young also. So like they don't even know how they feel about things. And it's hard for them, which is why, which we'll talk about the scene in volume 7 between the two of them is one of the biggest as far as like that's, and I think Mama even thinks like, I didn't mean to say so much all at once because she never has an opportunity. And it's finally a lot of what she's been thinking coming out. But in just to jump off of something, Sarah, that you had mentioned too about how often maybe Mao Mao on some level, it seems like she does care, but that she hasn't really dissected these thoughts for herself. I do want to elaborate again, just because you have to be careful when you have these sorts of things. Even if she maybe is starting to care, doesn't mean that that's like, well, if it seems like it, then it's totally fine to cross boundaries. And, you know, obviously that's not true. So, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, I was going to say, I think what I found weird about G's comment was if she herself feels swept up in all these power dynamics, so she's here. Yeah. Like if you were like, I just want freedom to do what I want, but also like you're part of this Mao Mao. It's like, or maybe she's not. Do you feel like you're part of this with the Emperor? I mean, I don't think it's a, you know, it's not exactly the same relationship. And I think Mao Mao does care about Jinji, but I guess I feel like it was a weird comment coming from her.
And I think she almost views it as, I gave you the opportunity to come back and to work with me again, and you chose. I think she views it as like you chose Jinshi over me, and if she might still be operating under factions in her mind, not, if anything, Mao Mao doesn't want to be involved with any of them in this capacity. She just wants to be able to work with medicine. That's it. And it's just currently she has more opportunity to do that, you know, doing what she's currently doing. But the one silly quote that I wanted to mention that I was saying as a jumping off point from what Sarah said is when Mao Mao's looking at those paintings, and they're like beautiful paintings of people. And it says, it occurred to her that if a certain elegant beauty had been there, he could practically have blended right in. An irrelevant thought if there ever was one. And I think that's the thing is, Sarah, you pointed out before how many times she's like, he's so pretty. I don't know. But she's like, she thinks of it like, who cares? And I think she genuinely doesn't treat him based off of how he looks necessarily. And it irritates her, I think, when he uses it to his advantage. I think she finds it disingenuous to some degree. However, she does often think about how beautiful he is. And I like how, I think that an irrelevant thought, if there ever was one, it's like, well, it's not really irrelevant, but the fact that you're having this like, no, like protest too much kind of thing. So I did find that moment kind of funny. But there's a lot of things that we could take away. So I think the overall view is that Sarah's fully in the camp of she's an unreliable character narrator. Sean's in the, I don't know. I don't really think she is. Christy, kind of seems like you think she is to the same extent all human beings are unreliable narrators. And I maybe fall in that camp too. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. Because there are certain things where the text, it makes it hard to dispute. Especially during all the scenes where it's like Mama doesn't want this. She's actually thinking like, get away, I want to get out of this. I'm like, I want to feel like she's just lying to herself, but at the same time, if she's so explicitly thinking that, I find it hard to ignore it.
Yeah, in scenes like what you're describing, when she's actively like, no, I don't want to be a part of this, I don't want to know. In those scenarios, it's like, regardless of what maybe she felt 5 minutes ago or what she'll feel later, in that moment, if she doesn't want to be involved, then she shouldn't, be forced to be involved in anything she doesn't want to be involved in. And of course, with this story, there's all the other factors of this patriarchal society and status and who her employer is. And, there's all these other factors which we recognize. But I think there's also the additional, like that scene that's so pivotal in volume 7, where she says so much, like, just come out with it and say it. And then he's like, okay, I will. And then he says, like, no, don't cover your ears. Like, she just told me, tell me what you think, and then does this. And you're like, that's a little confusing, I'll say that. And I do think, again, we'll talk also, I know people are probably waiting to talk about Volume 5's ending. But she also, I'm like, I feel like you knew who the hairpin was from. Because she kind of has a reaction to it when she gets it. And then later she's like, oh, this is from you? And you're like, she picks apart details and analyzes things all the time, and she's not aware of everybody giving her all these looks, and and it's hard to tell if like she wants to like maybe test the waters, but doesn't want to commit yet. It's hard to tell, and once again, it just feels like the like, well, no, she wants this, but which isn't at all what I mean. But I do think even then, it's like, as far as the lack of communication. If we're thinking of not in regards to what happens at the end of 5, which again we'll talk about, but we're thinking about like if Jinshi is seeing her wear this hairpin, in his mind he's probably like, she's wearing it, like he's probably thinking like,
that's my wife.
Yeah, like, oh, she's responding to it, she's accepting that I have, like, and maybe it's clearer now to her that she's also a possible, candidate for me to propose to or something, or a potential partnership. And that's probably what he's thinking. And meanwhile, Mao Mao's like, oh, a new hairpin, and you're like, did you not know? And so that's where I definitely think it makes sense that sometimes there is a repetition of on occasion. Luckily, I don't think it's overused, but what you described with the honey scene where, yeah, sometimes they think certain things based off of each other's actions. And going off what you said, Sarah, Mao Mao, maybe if you're thinking about how other people are perceiving her actions, the characters do tell her all the time, like, you need to pay attention to, because I think Riko-san even tells her in that scene, like, you need to be aware of how you're behaving right now, or he says something of like, you might need to take note of how everybody is reacting to you here, or Lahan does, or I think one of them tells her that. So I think, but again, she doesn't even want to have to play any politics or anything. She doesn't want to be there in the first place. So it sucks that it's like, I don't want to have to think about all these things, but you guys keep forcing me into this scenario, and then you're mad at me when I don't think about these things. And so there's a lot to the historical elements of this that I think add further complication. And if only everybody could just sit down and chat, over some tea or something. Sean, did you have something to add to that?
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe she only takes to heart Lohman's thing about, when you have evidence, still don't like jump to the conclusion. Maybe she only uses that in relation to herself, where she's like, maybe this hairpin means something, but I don't know for certain.
I think that's a good assessment.
Lohman wouldn't want me to do that. So then when it's like, oh, this is from you, it's like, maybe
I have further confirmation now?
Maybe it's authentic, but it's maybe also like, you like you're saying, you kind of knew, but then you're playing like, oh,
I think that's a fantastic point. I think that's probably very accurate. And I think she probably does that with her feelings all the time. I don't know exactly how I feel about this person, and I also don't feel like interrogating that. So I guess I'll just never know. I think she probably ends up in that position quite often, actually. I think that's a great point, Sean.
I think the quote was, is this the quote that you're talking about? When Riko-san's like, please remember, you aren't a disinterested third party. Never forget the import of what you wear on your head.
Yes, that is the quote. Thank you.
I had that highlighted too. I was like, ooh.
Yeah. All right. We've been circling around. End of volume 8. Big scene in 7. Obviously, we'll talk about 5. So I think this one kind of fully captures a lot of this. A lot to dissect with this one. What are your feelings regarding Mao and Jinshi? Where do you imagine their relationship is going? Where would you like it to go? So I do want to preface this all with, yes, all of us have seen that there are some translation issues with 5. Don't worry, we all saw it. And if you end up watching this and you don't know about this, I do want to be clear that the biggest difference to me is the tone of it, but the acts are still basically the same. But the tone, it does matter, but I don't want it to seem as though it's like, oh, well then like everything's actually, it was really a great, wonderful, loving scene. I think end of volume 5, it's still makes sense to read that scene, even if you're not reading it as like suddenly Jinshi is this angry abuser, which is kind of how it reads outside of the, you know, additional translations that people have made. Because there's like additional exclamation points and he seems very angry, as opposed to just, you know, what apparently it actually is. But what it actually is still crossing some lines, I think it's fair to say. And I absolutely think it's makes sense. I think most people read that and go, well, even reading the other translations, this is kind of still uncomfortable at the very least. Like Mao Mao seems like she's not totally into it. She's just trying to get out of it. And Jinshi seems like maybe he's treating this like it's this power play between them, like almost a playful power play, but then also I don't think that's how she feels about it. And I think it's completely normal and expected to still find that scene uncomfortable and to think that like something needs to change. So kind of going back to this prompt of where would you like it to go? I think a lot needs to change before the two of these characters can have a relationship that I am fully on board with. Because I think a lot of us, part of what makes it complicated is you want them to work out. You see super cute scenes between them, or you see how much, you know, he obviously cares about her. And, you know, there is the idea of like, it kind of seems like she cares about him. She even tells him like, well, I suppose I at least like don't hate you. I look on you like maybe kind of favorably or whatever. You know, she's like, and for Mao Mao, that's fairly a big deal. But regardless, they are not in a position currently where they're on the same page. The status situation, the fact that their society is patriarchal in nature, and not even just status as in the fact that he is the brother to the emperor or is believed to be the brother of the emperor, but also just, you know, a man and a woman, and the fact that there is the dynamic of women's futures are often tied to how much association they have with a man. And like Christy, you were pointing out, he can just command her to do things. So there's that level of that too. In order for them to have a relationship that I think I would be fully on board with, we have to level the playing field more. And obviously, we can't expect them to suddenly be acting as though they have all of modern standards for relationships. I mean, I think that would be like a huge stretch, but I do think there's the potential, because Jinshi does care very much about other humans, and he cares very much about how women are treated. It's the reason he starts the school. It's the reason he cared so much to try and ensure everybody was treated as fairly as possible in the rear palace. He looks after women when they're pregnant. Like, he wants to make sure their pregnancies are going well. And he obviously can see things happen to Aduo. It devastates him. There's a reason he's crying when Aduo is asked to leave. So he cares about women, and he hates when he finds out the reason that Mao Mao wears her freckles. So he obviously cares, but he's still a product of his society. And I think it's realistic, but it's uncomfortable. And I like that there's the potential for, in his, what I think is love for, or he thinks is love. Doesn't he even ask at one point, like, how do you know when you're in love or something? But I think there is something to, he has the potential through his care, at the very least, of Mao Mao, to have his eyes opened more to just how broken their system is and how imbalanced and unequal it is. I think there's a potential for that. So in that way, I would like their relationship if it transitioned into something like that. But in its current state, it's too imbalanced and something needs to change. That is my breakdown. We'll get into the specific scenes in a moment. Sean, what are your thoughts?
I agree with all of that. I gotta say, I have seen only one cute moment, and that is her with like the little monster, like she's putting like the fake scar stuff on there, and then she's like, yeah, pretending to be like a monster. Like, that was cute. Everything else, not quite as cute. So I need like 80 more cute moments.
You don't think it's cute when she sings a lullaby to him?
Maybe 1.5. Okay. I need like 80 more cute moments, and then I need Jinshi to fake his death with the resurrection, whatever. What do they call the resurrection
drug?
Potion? Whatever they do, yeah. So he's going to fake his death, and then Mao Mao will revive him, and he'll live out his days as a simple farmer, and they'll raise various herbs that she can sell, and no one will ever know that it's them. That's what I need.
I like how your where does it need to go is like Mao Mao better get to live the life that she wants with all of the herbs, and he's just there.
Yes. Yes, he is just there.
I will say a couple of moments that are funny is when the quack doctor, which by the way, when he goes home and he's like, I'm sorry I wasn't here when like our parents died, and you're like, no. But when he's like all proud of himself because he, you know, thinks that like, that's right, I did help deliver at these children or whatever. But his sister playfully is like, I didn't know you were gonna bring a potential wife home. And then like there's a noise and you realize Jinshi dropped all this stuff. And then in the whole scene where she's drinking and she's trying to play it up like, well, then if I lose, you know, whatever. She gives an amount and Jinshi's like, she's worth far more than that. And she's like, this idiot, shut up. God, you're ruining this. But I mean, I think those moments are cute. I think when she comes out of the carriage and he's like, were you asleep? And she's like, I have no idea what you could be talking about. He's like, there's a mark on your cheek. And she's like, I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Like little things like that I think are cute. When Gaoshin and Jinshi show up and she's like, oh good, you're here. And Gaoshin's like, you realize this is Jinshi, right? And then she's like, yes, I know it's him. Stuff like that, I think. Oh, and when she tries to tell Jinshi like, look at all these women, and that part in Gaoshin's like banging his head on something, or he's like off in a corner or whatever, contemplating you know, whatever
or whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, those moments, if it was like all that, but then when you have all these other ones, that's when you're like, well, let's, you know, hit the brakes for a second, gotta reassess. But yeah, I don't blame you, Sean. I would love if Mao Mao could just, you know, be an apothecary and he can help run the finances or something that she doesn't care about.
I'm just saying, we introduce the resurrection drug at the very beginning. It's going to be used at the end. He's going to, I'm telling you, fake death. That's how it's ending.
Christy, what about for you?
I like all the, like, they're not the interactions between them where they're not talking about their relationship. I like all of those moments, especially the one that you mentioned when she's like, here, like, here's some people who can help you sleep. And then he's like, that's not what I want. I love those moments where Mama's just like completely oblivious and you see Jinshi being so like just pathetic and a loser. I love those. And I don't love it when Jinshi starts to be, I don't want to say forceful, but he is like being more forceful to make her acknowledge things or bringing up the things that are kind of mutually silent mutual agreement that they don't talk about. Because in those cases, you see Mao Mao actively not wanting to be in that situation and talk about those things. But at the same time, if they don't have these conversations, their relationship will never progress. So obviously, I'm a big Jinshi and Mao Mao shipper. I want to see them together. I want to see them happy. I don't love the way that Mao Mao is in some of these situations. Because, okay, if we're going to talk about the end of Volume 5, for example, I would have, okay, the actions of that scene, fine, have it play out the way it did, but Mao Mao's internal dialogue, I think, changes how that scene is viewed entirely. Because the way that it was written, it was like Mao Mao, you know, she was like, get me out of here. She's like pinned to the ground or whatever, and she can't move, whatever. And then she's kind of just like, let's get this over with. But in my head, I'm like, I would have loved it so much more if it was more like Mao Mao thinking, oh, this loser has no idea what he's doing. Let me show him how it's done. I think that changes that scene entirely and makes it a little less uncomfortable. But yeah, definitely before they can progress any further, I completely agree with you, Elle, that power dynamics need to shift or need to change. And I think Jinshi branding himself definitely puts them one step closer, because he is no longer like he basically puts himself as a servant of Gyokuyo. However, you could also say that him doing that forces Mao Mao into a position that she wouldn't have been in before, because now he's like, oh, no one else can be my lady in waiting. No one else can see this. Only you can. Which I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, there's a lot to about that, and we'll get more into specifically all the potential repercussions, because that scene is one of the last things we're left with, and then it's like, well, there you go. Which is why, again, when you were like, are you even going to remember if you read ahead where it leaves off? And I was like, I will remember, I promise you. So we'll get more into this, the implications of that, because there are some like, what are predictions moving forward types of questions that go hand in hand. But yeah, absolutely. I think that scene, there is a level of like, well, now she's in this. And I think at the end of the day, Mama doesn't want to be involved in anything to do with anybody of any level of prestige. And I think that's why it was something where Jinshi, it makes the decision he made at the end of season 2 of the anime / light novel 4 probably so significant, because it was easier to be closer to Mao Mao when he could keep his identity a secret, but reveal it to her. And she even kind of accepted, like, well, I guess it doesn't, like, at the end of the day, there's that whole, when she gets the Ox Bezoars, like, well, whatever, maybe I'll make him one for real if ever I have, there's the kind of almost, okay, I've accepted it, but it's still a secret. Once it's like he had to take on the role of who he actually was to save her, but it also means he might lose her. And I think that was probably like a more intense version of what you described, Christy, with the, do I fire her or do I keep this a secret? And so he obviously doesn't want harm to come to her, but he doesn't want to lose her. And then also he does not want this life for himself either. He has never wanted it. It's the whole reason that he pretended to be a eunuch for years anyway. I think he was really hoping he could just kind of ride the wave until it settled, and then he could just drift into, the background and nobody would know. Like, I think there's a part of him that's like, can my stupid brother just like have another kid already so that I can get out of here? I think there was that level. So there's a lot to do with all of that. But the scene in volume 7 between them, just to kind of remind anybody in case there's some, memory things here. But when Mao Mao is talking to him, she's talking about how there's this customer that would come, and he thought that this woman that he was in love with at the Verdigris house knew, and then she turned out to go with someone else. And then he was just belly aching all the time and getting drunk and bemoaning his situation. She said, well, in my opinion, he could have avoided all of that heartbreak if he told the woman how he felt, clearly, unequivocally, so that she knew where they stood. It was the least he could have done. And then, be that as it may, you're right. This is Jinshi's response. He says, be that as it may, you're right, that with things as they stand, making you my wife could only harm you. Neither of us wants that. And this is after he tells her, like, don't cover your ears. I will tell you then. If that's what you want, I will tell you. He says, neither of us wants that. For you, I will remove any and every obstacle that keeps us apart. One day, just know that I won't let what you fear come to pass. I swear it. And I think there's a lot of like what he thinks she's referring to when she says, or when he says, I won't let what you fear come to pass. Because she told him before, I don't want to be an enemy of Lady Gyokyu. So because he doesn't know if he's brother or son of the emperor, I think that's why he takes this extreme action of branding himself, because in his mind, it's like, I have to assure her that I have to give Lady Gyokyu some kind of power over me, so that Mao Mao knows, look, see, even for her, I'm not going to make it to where we're ever going to be enemies with her, because I know you care about that. Additionally, I think what I was saying before about how Mao Mao always kind of describes her feelings in relation to some other scenario or somebody else's circumstances. She does that here again, where she talks about some guy would come and say these things, and then the woman didn't know where they stood. And it's like, obviously she's saying, just tell me how you feel so that I know where we stand. And she can't just like use that. And I think what's interesting is he, even in this scene, he's about to say, okay, you, and then he corrects himself. He's like, Mao Mao, and he has to like say her name. It's like, I think both of them are bad at like actually putting in the place of what they're feeling themselves and each other. I think that's why also in her head, she rarely refers to Jinshi as Jinshi, but like the beautiful nymph or the celestial, whatever, you know, like she's always doing that instead of just thinking like Jinshi. But in this scenario, I think that she like wants to have the answer, but then as soon as she has the answer, there's that whole idea of, he was doing me a kindness by not telling me, because of what Sean actually, I think, dissected well, this idea of like, for as long as there's some ambiguity, I can at least continue to sit back in that and let that continue on. But I think she both wants answers and doesn't want answers, in the same way in this scene at the end of Volume 8 with Jinshi. I think Jinshi wants to finally grant Lady Gyokyu more power over him, and he wants to abandon his position. But I also think he doesn't want to hurt anybody. So I think for him, this is actually an extremely painful thing, not just physically, but emotionally to do, because the Emperor's reaction, I think, is devastating for Jinshi. And I think he doesn't want to hurt anybody. He also doesn't want to force Mao Mao's hand, but he's also trying to show her, like, look, see, I'm not going to let what you fear come to pass. And then, of course, what happened with her mother and Lacan, which he knows, I think he also wants to ensure that she recognizes, I'm not going to have this, we think we're in some kind of agreement, and then it doesn't work out, and then you're left in the dirt. I want you to know that I'm not going to let that happen. But by not letting it happen, you're almost, it feels like forcing her to be with you in a sense, like that's your version. But he says, like, I'm a man who lives by his word, I'm going to promise that. And it's like, but what if that's not really what she wants? Which
I would like to interject here.
I was going to say I have more thoughts on this, but I want to let everybody else talk. So
I have been thinking about the end of Volume 8. I still don't know if I like it. And you were talking about communication earlier. I might have given Mao Mao a heads up. Hey, I'm planning on branding myself. What do you think? Because it kind of seems, even if, he's granting her power too. I mean, she could also go blab around to the entire palace that, like, hey, guess who's got a brand? But I mean, she doesn't have to be his wife now, right? I mean, like, that's not like, I don't think that's the message, but it's kind of the message, right? I mean, it's like kind of emotional blackmail to an extent, right? I mean, like, look what I did for you. I branded myself, like, I don't know. And
he's like, I can't marry anyone else, basically.
Yeah, and because if you do marry anyone else, now you do know there's this other person out there, though, who knows your deep, dark secret. And I guess, like,
I do want to add really fast. I think in a way he's telling them, don't force me into a marriage. Because, and I think that's his out. Like, even if he can't be with Mao Mao, now they can't, like, force him, because then that gives power to someone else. So I think he's saying, I would rather not marry anyone then, even if Mao Mao says no.
Yeah, but I feel like the
hope,
the underline is that Mao Mao will say yes. I guess I think, like, I don't like it as a thing to do without speaking with her first. Like, if they had talked and then she's like, I actually think that's a really smart idea, then okay, I would have been like, cool, whatever.
Well,
but
do you think she would have ever said that was a good idea? So, like,
no, but that's the thing. I don't know if it's a good idea. Like, I guess I kind of was like,
I do want to add, though, sorry to keep interjecting here.
Yeah. When does
You're
Sean
right.
get the floor around here?
Sorry,
You know,
I
like-
just what I do. What I I do want to say though, once again, of course, in relation to Mao Mao, the hope is that she'll accept. Even if she doesn't, there is a part of him that's doing this for himself. He does not want to be forced to be emperor. He said that now. He's said it for years. The emperor knows this. This is also for himself. So I do want to grant him.
He didn't need her there then.
Of
There's
course,
no reason to have her there.
right?
Like if he had just done this in front of the emperor and
somebody
Gyoku.
to treat the wound, and he could have brought someone else in, but that means she would have been probably angrier if he made it be Loman. So he can't be Loman. I guess you could bring in some like random doctor guy that's there, but I think he brought her in because he, of course, like we're saying, knew that Mao Mao would then know, and then like you're saying, it is a level of emotional manipulation to some degree, of course. But I also think if he had like had nobody around, that thing can get infected really bad, and then she could
splash
die.
some water on it, you know.
I think the wound is much worse than you realize. Just saying. So he had to
rub some dirt on it, kid. You got it.
But I think this is relevant to what you're saying. He found himself. This is earlier. He says he found himself thinking of Mao, specifically how he might talk her into accepting his proposal. I at least appreciate. I actually agree very much with what you're saying about like it does feel like emotional blackmail. It feels I made this big gesture.
What if someone was like, "Hey, I love you so much that I'm gonna like stab myself right now. Also, will you marry me?" Like, I feel like we'd be like, "Hey, that's not really cool."
Right.
And
yeah,
I don't think it's really cool. I wish he hadn't done that. I really wish he hadn't done that.
How do you wish he would have gotten out of this position for himself? Mao Mao aside, how do you think what would have been a preferred means of
fake your death with the resurrection potion
that you don't know if it's gonna work and you might be paralyzed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Live out your days.
How does he make that without including Mao Mao?
Find Surin.
You mean Sure?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So then freak Mao Mao out after the fact? Like, don't give her a heads up you're gonna fake your death?
I didn't think all of this through. I'm just saying he didn't either.
I don't disagree. I don't know if he thought about everything. You know who's in his ear whispering is Surin. Surin has been putting him up earlier when she's like, "Oh, isn't it just so sad that the Emperor wanted someone and it didn't work out? If only they had actually pursued."
Actually, no, I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't think of her when we were talking about characters that we think differently about now, but I think differently about her now. I don't know about old Surin.
As I've said for so long, I think Surin is Auduo's mom. So I think Surin's like, I don't like what happened between the two of them. Those two could have made it work, but they let stupid stuff get in the way. So you got to live your life. She tells him, don't live your life with regrets. And he's like, don't live with regrets. Like, how am I supposed to do that? Or easier said than done. So I think she played a role in this.
What's one way to have regrets is to brand yourself. That's a good way to have.
I think he's sad for maybe the pain he caused the Emperor, but I don't think he regrets it. I think he's like, I've been telling you.
Young man. Young man. He's got a lot of life to live.
Speaking of Sweden, even in the end of volume 7, after they have that conversation, Mao Mao runs out and she sees Sweden, and Sweden's like, good job.
I was like, what?
So she supports it.
Yeah, she definitely was involved for sure in coming up with this plan. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this? Because I feel like you were pushing back a little bit with Sean's feelings of like, about the whole thing. So you talk now.
I feel like I have a lot of thoughts about all of this. So I don't even know where to start. I think I alluded to this in our previous discussion because I had known what was going to happen, but I didn't want to say too much. That I think that Mao Mao and Jinchi are bad at communicating with each other, and they definitely need to work on that before more happens. Because, like, as we saw in these volumes, like, Jinshi has a specific expectation of how his actions will come across and how Mao Mao will interpret them, but then we see that Mao Mao does not interpret them that way, like, especially with the hairpin. So they need to, like, be on the same page. I think somebody said this. They need to be on the same page before things go further. The scene at the end of volume 5, I feel neutral about it, I guess, because, like, to me it's clear that Jinshi doesn't want to do anything that would hurt Mao Mao. Like, I don't think he would ever push her far enough that it would be something that genuinely hurts her, and I think he also has a hard time, like, expressing how he feels. So I think those two things in, like, together kind of produced that scene. But I agree that it is uncomfortable. Now I'm forgetting all the other things I had to say about the future, like, where I want their relationship to go. I think for me there are kind of two paths, and one of them is what Sean said. Like, they somehow find a way to, like, get out of these positions and, like, run away, basically, because they'll get rid of that kind of power dynamic and, like, the expectations that are on them societally and everything. And then the other path, I think, is that Jinshi possibly would accept or be forced into more power, like being the emperor, which I don't really know how that would go, but there's just been all this tension so far of him not wanting to be emperor that I think him eventually having to step into that role is maybe not, like, such a hard thing to see, especially given everything that's led up to this point.
Do you think that's a possibility now with his brand?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Like, because, like, what if Gyoku dies or something? Then what does that mean? Like,
That's true. Also, well, I don't know. Could you just put, like, a brand over your brand? You know, just like
rebrand?
a circle or something. You know, just never mind. Take it back.
Or just cut that flesh off entirely, so it's just like,
Had
I don't know.
a battle scar. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, obviously, I don't think that path would go as well, because then it would be on Mao Mao to produce heirs, or it would be on someone else to produce heirs, but then that would be bad for Mao Mao. And, like, I don't think that is necessarily, like, a viable option for them to be happy. So I don't know.
Well, I
What did
unfortunately
you think of the end of volume 8 in general? Are you happy with branding? Are you against branding?
I mean,
Are you pro branding?
I think it was once again an example of Jinshi, like, expecting people to take that a certain way, like, specifically Mao Mao take it a certain way, even though he hasn't told her what way he wants her to take it.
Can I just say I no longer know what happened at the end of volume 5? Like, I don't even know what actually, like, because I read it once and I was like, I didn't like that. And I read the other version and I still was like, I don't know if I really like that, but I liked it less the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look online and people are like, well, in this language it comes across just fine. And then I'm like, well, then I don't understand what actually occurred. That I've just given up trying to know what happened. But the image is rather startling.
Yeah. I see some comments, people saying, like, oh, Mao Mao just lies to herself. Like, okay, which we know, but in regards to that scene, I'm like, I don't think that's the case. Like, I don't think you can say that about this scene. Because she very clearly is not in a comfortable position. But yeah, I think everything else that happened would have been, I'm like, okay, I can excuse it, I can look past it, but the part, I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
What
And I
is
don't
this?
think I don't want to, I am very bad at remembering specifics, but I don't feel like when I read the other version that felt any better. Like I was just like, oh, it still seems like he's kind of choking her. So I was like,
I think the only
okay.
difference between the two versions is that the official version doesn't make it clear that they're already kissing, right?
Right.
I think that I feel like that's literally the only
Yeah.
difference.
But it does lead into a great scene in the following volume where Jinshi experiments with Boston.
They're so stupid and I love it.
But I also think like even that reaction leads me to believe that like apparently he felt like he was like he lost, you know, somehow in the previous interaction. So I don't know how to interpret.
I feel like the way I interpret that is like he wanted to sweep Mao Mao off her feet or something. Yeah. But then it turns out, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing and she's way more experienced. He's like, I've lost.
And he thought, you know what's really sexy is if I choke her a little bit or something like that.
You know what's really sad is that both of these characters you discover through the events in these 4 volumes, they have both been basically assaulted, because you find out in this scene that Perrin would basically force her to do these things until she cried. And she would do it over and over and over again. And then, which is such a weird dynamic with the person that's kind of your mom, kind of your sister. So there's that. And then on top of that, in a volume with Jinshi, you find out that pretty much right as he entered the rear palace, he was assaulted. And he even thinks like, I never got over that. I never have been able to laugh about that. Yeah. So they've both been assaulted. We also see in their conversation about the, you know, like tragic romance or whatever, that both of them, I think, have seen the darker sides of relationships and how things play out to believe that it's ever that simple. And I think the difference between them is that Jinshi, I think, wants to try to find a path where like, well, maybe if you just try hard enough, it's possible, even if it seems like it's not. And I think Mao Mao is like, this is dumb. Like, I think she is very much like, this is never a thing. And why bother trying to some degree? But in this scene, I think Mao Mao just even kind of says, like, she just goes into autopilot because it's what she's been taught. And like you said, Christy, she's very much like, I just want to get out of this. But he comes away being like, wow, I really don't know what I'm doing. And then later, this is why I feel like that scene, I wish the translation was more accurate so that we have a better understanding, because they react like it was an awkward makeout session, not you kind of assaulted me, and like, which I understand that even for her and their whole society, like what they view as assault is different than what we would categorize it as. So I recognize she might not think of that in that way anyway. But they still are more of like, well, this is kind of awkward, you know? And even when they think of it later, like the tickling thing, she's like, oh, this is him getting back at me for what I did or whatever. And you're like, these are not quite the same. So I think in that way, sorry, Luna's now licking my foot because when I went to feed her, I very clearly broke my toe. So I'm kind of I'm just trying to power through.
Wait, are you okay?
Yeah, but my toe is definitely broken. So
oh my god,
broken.
Yeah. So I just took some ibuprofen. We're just gonna push through, but Luna's, I think, checking on it.
Oh my god.
But that's okay because we still have more to talk about. So we'll go to urgent care after this. But like,
you don't have to.
Yeah, do you want to go now?
No, I want to finish this. It's okay. It doesn't hurt.
We're only at almost 2 hours. I think.
I know. Okay, how about we just talk about some things that we really wanted to make sure we got around to? So what are some things that we haven't talked about that everybody's like, I really wanted to mention this, or some funny moments or favorite moments? Because the last part is, or predictions, I think would be a good one as well. Everybody, please don't be concerned, okay? What are your predictions?
I have no predictions, but I'll say a funny part.
Okay.
Well, I already gave my predictions that the resurrection drug and they're going to live happily ever after. Okay.
Okay.
Funny part. I really liked when Lacan is being weird and following her around and stuff. I think Mao Mao's visiting with Loman, and Loman says like, there's a certain someone who always shows up about this hour, claiming it's snack time. Are you sure you should be here? And then she just is like, oh, I'll see myself out, and she just like hops out the window. I found that very amusing.
I did really like when they censored the grasshopper. I very much enjoyed that. I have a lot of quotes that I find quite funny from this section. I like, of course, I said it to all of you when I read it, so it's not anything new. But when they're drawing, when Choyu, who we haven't had a chance to talk about much, unfortunately, but when he's drawing what is supposed to be the perfect person for Mao Mao, and he's asking like, do you prefer sharper features or do you prefer rounder features? And she thinks about how much she hates the sharp features. And I made sure to have the quote exactly because it was so funny to me. But now I'm like scrolling through, there's just so many. But basically she says for in her mind, they could just go die in a fire, which is so, because she thinks of like sharp features are like fox-like, and so she doesn't like that. But then also when Yao and Enon are asking like, oh, why do you draw the freckles on? And she decides it's like having to explain why, though, was tricky. It was risky to bring Jinshu into it. Finally, she just said religious reasons. So I do enjoy that part quite a bit. Christy, what's a funny moment for you or a prediction for you?
Okay, funny moments. Any moment with Lacan, I love him. Especially, okay, two moments specifically when Loman, he's like trying to do his job, and then Lacan just bursts in and he's like, Uncle, I got like whatever here. He just bothers. I love how much he loves Mama and his uncle, and they're both kind of just like at him. I just love him. And then the second Lacan moment is I'm blanking. There was another moment, but I don't remember. Anyway. Also, any interaction, any moment with Engen and Yao, anytime Yao reacts to anything and Engen is just like, isn't my mistress so cute? And she purposely puts Yao in these positions where she can see her in distress. I'm like, I relate. I like gently bullying the people I love to see them in mild distress.
I also sorry, I was just gonna say that then some self-important person gave a self-important speech and finally the truth started. I like that from Malmo. Anyway, sorry to have interrupted.
My pretty much only and main prediction at this point is that Adwa is going to have a bigger role to play in the future. I don't think Gyokuyo is safe in her position because it really feels like the emperor is only making her empress because of political reasons with the West. But from the narration, it really sounds like the one that the emperor really loves is Adwa. Yeah. So, and also I don't think it's very clear whether the emperor knows if Jinshi is his son or his brother, because I always assumed that he thought Jinshi was his brother, but the way that he reacts to Jinshi's branding and hearing that he doesn't want to be in position to ascend the throne, the way he reacts is, I feel like, so much more than how a brother would react to his younger brother saying that. It feels almost like it's like a father whose son is rejecting him. So I don't know. There's something there.
I agree. I think he very much acts more like a dad in that moment than a brother. I think even Mao Mao and Jinshi both seem slightly surprised by his reaction. And then I feel so bad. So Sarah, I want you to give your funny moments and the parts that you have predictions for. But also, I'm so sorry in this discussion we didn't get around to like the White Lady and Shrine Maiden stuff.
Yeah.
Even though you could say they're like big picture antagonists in this section, and I'm so sorry. I feel so dumb that I broke my toe. But Sarah, what are your predictions, and are there any funny moments you wanted to mention?
I have to say that the Paper Village chapter is possibly my favorite chapter in the whole series so far, because just Mao Mao drinking and being like, I'm worth this much. I just loved it. I think that whole chapter is great. I also love interactions with Kokuyu. And I hope to see him more, because he really wasn't in the last 2 volumes that much, but I love that Mao Mao just always calls him a dumbass.
I forgot about him. I love him.
I had that as a quote, where he's like, "Oh yeah, we are. Here it is. Oh yeah, we're doing great." Koku replied, sounding every bit the dumbass he usually was.
I was just trying to find his name because I forgot what it was, and I just found one of the quotes that I had marked for that. And he's just so funny. It says, "You want to see?" Kokuya said, and then with a word of warning, "It's pretty gross." He lifted the eye patch. "Oh, yuck," Cho-yu exclaimed. Politeness was not his strong suit. Like, I love that, like, that whole dynamic at the Verdigris house. Just like, they're
I
all
really
just
like
dumb.
the head guard at the Verdigris house as well.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. Him and Liaku seem like they'd be friends.
Yes.
And then what are your predictions, Sarah?
This is fun because I actually get to give predictions now, because I don't know what's happening next. I think it was Jinshi mentioned at the end of volume 8 that the West was a concern, but also the North was a concern. And I was like, that's interesting, because I don't know if that refers to like the Shi clan, or if there's actually more northern stuff that could be a concern. So I have a feeling there's going to be more stuff happening in the broader world. I don't know. That's immediately where my mind went to. So I think there will be more abroad things happening.
That was one of my questions of, do you think we're done with the West /
No.
yeah.
Not
And
at all.
then what about Locust, Grasshopper? Do you think that's like, oh, we fixed that problem, or do you think that's coming back?
That's coming back.
All right. I cannot wait, because you all know I've been screaming at you about how much I love these next volumes. I thought volume 10 was my favorite until volume 11. And not even initially with volume 11. It was like something takes you very back in volume 11. Before we hop off, I want to do, in the spirit of Kokyu being like, here, look, Sean, will you come into this room and assess for everybody the situation with my toe? Because I really don't want people to think I'm just failing and being a wimp.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone doubts that.
I hit it, and then I was like, ha! And then I looked down and I was like, oh no! So, look, Sean.
That's not good.
No. So my pinky toe is just completely turned to the side, because I caught it on like a door frame as I was going through the hallway, and so now it's face. And I even looked up like, what did you?
That was gross.
Yeah. So
it's gross to look at.
Because for a half second I was like, oh, it doesn't hurt that bad, and then I looked at it and I was like, dang it. So
please go.
I wouldn't have said, but Luna came over like checking, and I'm just like, okay. So I'm so sorry, but you know what?
Everyone, goodbye.
Sean's really worried.
Now I'm like, you shouldn't have shown me.
Yeah. You probably don't want to see it. Maybe, but it's like I would just tape it to my other toe, but I'm like, it's a different direction. I'm afraid of like the way it's. Oh, it's okay, Luna. He'll be here in a sec. Anyway, thanks everybody who joined. So sorry, there were so many things to discuss. I think we got through a lot of really important ones. Where do you get the manga novels from? I think the manga is sold. I've seen the manga at Barnes & Noble, if you're referring to the light novels. Those are also, I've seen them at Barnes & Noble. You can read them on things like Hoopla or Everand. Various library apps often have them. So you can check them out through that. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. I hope, Sean really wants to go to the doctor now. So, okay, bye, everyone.